Welcome to the third video in this series for North Georgia Knitting Guild's 2022 Sock Knit Along. This video is all about heels, specifically the short row or hourglass heel. I'll start with the theory behind this heel, and then I'll demonstrate how to knit one of these. Here's the theory on the short row or hourglass heel. You'll have your heel stitches on one needle, and you'll work almost to the end of that needle, and then turn and work back, and again almost to the end of the needle, and then turn, and this time you'll turn one stitch sooner, and then again as you come down one stitch sooner, and so on, back and forth until your heel is about a third in the center that aren't worked, and a third with the other set of turns. And then you have a choice. You can immediately move from making a little mound by going long to short. You can immediately change to going short to long to make a valley. Or you can do what I will do in my demonstration and use two cleanup rows. So you work across and you clean up all those turns on this side, and then you work back and you clean up all the turns on this side, and then you work short to long. So this time you'll go one stitch farther than you did before. Until you are back where you began. And when you get to that, you'll work all the way across and then get back in the round by working around on your instep stitches. And the last thing you'll need to do is clean up those first turns right here at the beginning of the heel needle. When you graph it out, you can see it looks like an hourglass, which is why this type of heel is called a short row or an hourglass heel. Now let's see in practice how to work a short row heel turn. For my swatch here, I have 24 stitches in the round. I've parked 12 of them on two needles as if they were an instep. You'll have to imagine the sock toe and the foot of the sock down here. And I've parked 12 stitches, or half the stitches, on my heel needle. Whether you are working a short row heel or some other type of heel, most sock heels will use half the circumference stitches for the heel. So half the stitches for the heel. And I will start by knitting almost to the end of this needle. I am almost at the end of the needle because I intend to work cleanup rows between the bottom half of my hourglass heel and the top half of my hourglass heel. I will leave 2 stitches here. If you're not working cleanup rows, you can leave just 1 stitch, but I'm doing cleanup rows, so I need 2 stitches here. And then the short row method I have chosen is the twin stitch method. That's sometimes called a dopplegänger stitch or a shadow wrap stitch. You can use whatever method you like if you prefer German short rows, or Japanese short rows or wrap and turn short rows, whatever method you like, do that. I'm going to demonstrate twin stitch. And the way I like to do twin stitch is I take my right needle tip and get it down into the mother stitch, and then wrap normally, and I've made a fresh knit stitch, and I pop that stitch up on the left needle next to her twin sister. And now I turn. I will purl back almost to the end of my heel needle. Okay, so I am at the end of the heel needle, and once again I need to work my twin stitch, but I'm doing it purl-wise this time. For a purl-wise twin stitch, I like to purl into the stitch below. So rather than having the needle here, I have the right needle here. Wrap normally, pull that through, and then what I like to do is take that right needle tip and put it through the stitch on the needle as if I had done that all along. And you see that makes the new stitch pop out behind the previous stitch. I want that new twin to lie to the back of the work when I clean this up later. I pulled them off the left needle tip to clean them up. I'll put them both back on, and now I turn. And now I'll knit back down the heel needle. This time I stop one stitch before my previous turn. It's nice if you are using a short row turn method where you can recognize where you've turned. It makes a good road sign, as it were, in your knitting. And if you don't like working the twin stitch the way I did, by digging down into the mother stitch, another way to do it is to use your right needle tip to come up behind the mother stitch and pull her up onto the left needle tip, work the mother stitch, let her fall off, and now put the new twin daughter stitch next to her twin sister. And now I turn. Time to purl back across the heel needle. And once again, if you don't like the method I typically use for making a twin stitch purl-wise, another way to do it is to slide the stitch, slip it over to the right needle. Use your left needle tip to get the mother stitch. Purl the mother stitch. Let the mother stitch drop off the left needle. And now put your pair of twins back on the left needle. And I turn. And now I knit back across the heel needle. But you see the rows are getting shorter because already I am ready to do my turn. And I turn. And I purl back down the needle. Work my twin stitch. And I turn. So at this point I've made a little hill or mountain shape. That's the bottom half of my hourglass. I will now work across and clean up these short rows, and then work back across and clean up these short rows. So I clean up the twin stitches by working them together. And here's why I needed to leave 2 stitches when I started, because I need one for my turn here on the cleanup row. If you forgot to leave 2 stitches, you can borrow one from the instep stitches instead. But I remembered to leave one here, so I have one to make my turn. And I turn. And I'll purl back down the needle. Here I need to clean up my short row turns, so I purl these twin stitches together. And then again, when I get to the end of the row, this is why I left an extra stitch there, so I can work my turn at the end of my cleanup row. And I turn. On a short row heel, you typically divide the stitches into thirds, so I worked turns on a third of the stitches here and a third of the stitches here, and I left a third of the stitches in the center unworked, not part of the turning maneuvers. Now when I go to build back up, working short and getting longer, my first short row at the bottom of my valley will be worked over these stitches. So I will work this stitch and then turn, and I'll work to this stitch and turn. If you are on a larger heel and likely to forget what you're doing, you might put a couple stitch markers in to remind you. There's that fourth stitch. Those are my 4 stitches in the center of my heel. So now I need to work my heel turn maneuver, and I turn. Short row maneuver, really. And I'll purl across those 4 stitches in the center of my heel. And then once again, work the short row maneuver, whichever one I happen to be using, and turn. This time I'm working longer. So I clean up the previous turn, and then I work the maneuver for the next turn. And turn the work. And the same thing as I purl back across. I clean up the previous turn, and then I work the maneuver for the next turn. And turn the work. and knit across the needle again. I cleaned up the previous turn. Work the new turn. And that will be the last one I work in this direction. And I turn the work. And then I'll purl almost to the end of the needle. Clean up the previous turn, make the new turn, and once again turn the work. Okay, you'll be glad to know that's the last time we turn the work. So now I am ready to return to working in the round. I will work down the heel needle and then onto the instep needles. I need to clean up my turns here and here, and I also needed to clean up these two turns. If you are likely to forget about these, put a pin over here to remind you when you get all the way back around that you have business to do here. So I will knit across the heel needle. Clean up this turn, clean up this turn, and again, if you were using a different short row method than the one I used, you would clean up the turn in whatever way makes sense for that method. And now I am onto my instep needles. If I had a stitch pattern, I would work whatever the next row is for that stitch pattern. For the swatch, I made it plain. That was half the instep stitches. That was the other half the instep stitches. And now remember, I have to clean up my short row turns at the beginning of the heel needle. So that's the last thing I have to remember to do as I get back in the round. And now I'll just work to the end of the heel needle. And I'm at the end of the heel needle. And let's take a look at it. So you see how it creates this little cup shape. Little mountain and then a valley. So there you are. That is how to work a short row or hourglass heel for your sock. Happy sock knitting!